Welcome to Imagining Otherwise, a podcast from Cape. I'm Dami, and in this episode, I'm excited to be joined by Tirion, Aanchal and Edie from Keeping It Wild, a traineeship run by the London Wildlife Trust to help young people take action for nature and the climate. Together, we explore what high-quality climate change education means to them, what they wish they'd learned at school, why it matters to their generation, and how it can be made richer, more purposeful, and more connected to real life. Their reflections are honest, inspiring, and a perfect reminder of why young people's voices must be at the heart of shaping climate change education for the future. Enjoy. So, Tirion, Aanchal, Edie, thank you so much for being with us here today. Today, it's that we've not had this many guests on the podcast before, and where we've got three people who know each other. Can you start by, I'm not sure which one of you would want to say this, but I want you to tell us and our listeners a little bit about the London Wildlife Trust, which is what's kind of brought the three of you together at this point in time. So maybe we could start from that and then we'll kind of go into your individual paths to that.
Yeah, so London Wildlife Trust is a charity focused specifically on London, and it's one of the only charities that I believe that specifically focuses on London to conserve and restore biodiversity in the green spaces there. And the three of us were not too long ago part of the Keeping It Wild collective, which is sort of an initiative that's aimed at young people, so people from 16 to 30, to get them connected with green spaces and give them, like, upskill them in related skills to just give them, just upskill so that could help them for future things, because we know that young people sort of face like difficulties in getting into different industries nowadays, just because it seems that everyone wants experience, but then it's hard to gain that experience, especially if it's unpaid as well. But luckily, us three were in a traineeship, and yeah, I don't know if you guys want to talk more about that as well.
I'm particularly interested from all three of you in, what made you join it. It sounds like a brilliant project in itself, but like, what was your own individual motivation for joining the project?
So I graduated in 2024 in May with a biology degree, and initially I was very heavily focused on the other side of biology, kind of biosciences, of like chemical and medical biosciences, before I realized it really wasn't for me. And in the last 2 years of my degree, I really shifted it around to be more of an ecology focus. And me being so new to the field, both academically and professionally, I didn't know what was out there. So I've spent a year before the traineeship, or 7 to 8 months at least, just doing all sorts of odd bits here and there, to kind of figure out what's there. And I thought this was just such an amazing opportunity to be in nature in London, where I'm from, and it didn't require me to, go miles and miles away to be somewhere, and I can't drive either. So it was a very accessible opportunity, and presenting itself as a traineeship, really kind of filling you on the skills that you need in the beginning, but also the kind of social capital that you need from the people in your workspace to figure out how do you get to certain roles, what roles exist, what roles are going to exist. I think that was a really important aspect of it that made me want to join. And I was very lucky in getting it. It is a very competitive traineeship, and I think the 4 months that we've completed has really shaped my idea of this sector, especially as it exists in London. And it's been a really good kind of catapult into my career. Yeah.
Thank you. Tirion, same question to you. What motivated you?
Yeah, so similar to Anchal, I also did a biology degree and also graduated back in 2023. And afterwards, I was a bit tired of academics. I'd been doing school since like quite a small age, and by the end of it, I was a bit tired of biology. So I did take a break, and for a while, I was an usher at one of the theatres in London. And while doing that, I was like, oh, this is quite fun. It's enjoyable. It's different skills. But after the break, I thought to myself, oh, I might want to try like biology or like a science-based career again. So similar to Edie, I looked it up at the right time and found the traineeship. And it was really nice that it was advertised as trying a bit of everything, like trying a bit of community engagement, a bit of education, a bit of practical knowledge, just to give me a better idea to, okay, I know I got tired of biology before. Maybe it's something besides research that I want to do. And this gave me a bit of a taster of different things and helped me focus on where I might want to go into in the future.
Yeah, this was like quite a big part of it for me. I didn't go to uni, I didn't get a degree. I did an art foundation and I was planning on doing a degree in painting. But I kind of decided it wasn't for me. I didn't really feel like education was like the right place for me. I didn't feel like I was learning very much. And I didn't feel like I learned very well in that kind of very formal setting. And it kind of like put me quite against education. Like I like learning, but I spent the like years I would have been doing a degree working, kind of doing customer service, and I felt like I was learning a lot about people and like work structures and stuff like that. But it'd been a long time since I really like learnt kind of facts and stuff like that. And I didn't think there was a kind of way to do that apart from like formally sitting down and learning it. So that it was a really great experience for me and it really worked for me. It was very practical. It was very hands-on. Like as the other two said, like you do really get it in your head by just applying it and going over it and speaking to so many people who know so much. Like that was a kind of best opportunity was we got to meet so many people, but also we learned that nobody knows everything about everything, which was really great to know because it was quite daunting going in there feeling like I was a bit behind from not having a science degree. But it wasn't at all. Like I think all three of us kind of really like learned so much about different things. And as they said, like it is very self-led as well. Like you could learn more about the things you were more interested in. So I think that really worked for all of us really. It was like a really great practical way of learning.
So Edie, I'm going to stick with you and just pull a little. Oh, Anchal, you wanted to jump in on
Yeah,
something. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about that because so Edie grew up in the countryside and she's very, been out in nature almost all her life. And one of the points I made is, wow, it's so amazing to be in nature and learn from nature, almost as if it's a new thing that I've discovered. And it's kind of that thing it's kind of that sentiment that goes around on social media. It's me at 23 discovering that you can do this when for all of human history, people have been doing this. And Edie, you've been doing it. And I think the kind of attitude, the fears, and your relationship with nature that comes when you've grown up with it versus not grown up with it is really different. I just wanted to mention that because I feel like the way Edie conducts herself in the natural environment is a lot different than I do, which is a little more reserved, more scared. So I just wanted to make a comment on that.
You were still very
Okay.
up for it though.
This
Nervously
reminds
so.
me, Edie, I'm kind of going back to your experiences at school. I kind of, to as much as you feel comfortable sort of talking about there, because really, here we're talking about, what could be different? How could we imagine, something a little bit different? And so you said that the school, that sort of formal learning environment at school didn't work so well for you, whereas this was, you found yourself being able to kind of learn the facts that you'd possibly, I don't know, maybe kind of like resisted a little bit, but you've kind of found yourself being able to learn. I hope that's a fair representation
Yeah.
of what you said. I'm curious whether there was, um, when you think back to your school, and it's one of the things that we've asked you to think about, like what was there any point in your school time in school that was particularly engaging? Maybe it was a teacher, maybe there was some aspect of the learning. If you could say a little bit more about that, I'm curious as to, whether there was anything in that experience that did stick out for you and kind of really it was a bit more inspiring for you.
I don't know if this quite answers the question, but I feel like school does like the structure has been kind of made for a reason, and I think it suits different subjects better. For some people, like I think it's kind of very subject based, and I think it does seem like every subject is treated in the same way. Like I feel like we've kind of grasped a structure and are trying to fit every subject into that same structure. Whereas like I knew for art, it doesn't fit into a same structure as you could apply like astrophysics. So for me, I think it is very structure based, and I think it's other people's like motivation, and they saw university as like a stepping stone. And I imagine for Aanchal and Tirion it is like a similar thing. Like there are definitely routes into the sector, and I think quite a lot of the routes into the sector are through degrees. And like I really admire like how much they know, and they are like so intelligent, and like their brains do work in very different ways to mine, that like academic work like clearly does work better. And I think it is important to have that balance and like work out what works for everybody. And yeah, but just making sure we have all of those options open, so routes are accessible for like different kind of types of brains.
So Tyrion, you've been nodding, both of you have been nodding along, but Tyrion, what resonates the most with you on that?
I agree with like on Edie's being like there should be a balance and like openness to everyone. At least comparing to like my friend group and the ones that I still keep in contact with. I know a lot of us are like career-wise, at least we were two different types. We were either like for example, I'm like I want to do conservation, so then I'll like choose the subjects that will make me appealable, like applicable to that. Or some of my friends were like, oh, I really like physics, or I'm really good at physics, and then therefore, or I'm really good at English, or I really like English, and therefore they followed that, and then the job they end up in is sort of like just building up on that. So I think it would be nice if, I think looking back, I personally would have preferred maybe I should have explored a bit more, like subject wise. And maybe I think my friends also, the ones that are like, oh, I like this subject, maybe they also think that they should have explored it more career wise. So it's nice to have a bit of like more balance, because I feel like at least my friend group, we were two types of people. And looking back, we were like, oh, it would have been nice to have a bit more like thought on the other's perspective, because it would have given us a bit more of a rounded idea of what we wanted to do in the future.
One thing I want to touch upon is social capital and how that affects not just social capital within the relationships that you have, but also within the school structure. I went to a relatively big secondary school, and I think because of that, it's hard to have kind of personal relationships with teachers to the point where they know you, know your skills, know your aspirations. And I think what really worked for me was seemingly, 5 minutes of talking to me, I seemed like someone who was a good student. And so I got pushed down that good student route. Whereas some of my friends who perhaps dressed differently or met before, and I told her some things, and she was like, I guess you should do this then. And, that was it. That was the passing kind of exploration I had. And then that brings me on to social capital and reflecting on where my friends are now. I think my one friend who had parents who had been to university, been through that structure, could really advise him and give him advice on what he should be doing during his A-levels, what subjects he should be taking, what subjects he might want to explore, and have that talk with him. Whereas I'm the first-gen university student in my family, and in my friend group, there are quite a couple of us who are that as well. And we're all in a position where we're like, maybe I would have done a different degree, or maybe I would have done things differently. And I think that comes from a place that is lacking that exploration because of those things I mentioned. Yeah.
So yes, as we're thinking about what opportunities do you think that could still be created, or what opportunities do you think have been missed when you were at school to prepare you to teach you more about your natural environment and give you more education about our changing climate, and prepare you to live in this world and imagine otherwise in this world, and actually make a difference in the next stages of your careers and lives in general?
Yeah, this is something that became very, I think there are a lot of answers to this question. I'm going to focus on quite a niche one because it's something that's been quite relevant to us recently through our traineeship. Aanchal and I, with the support of Tirion, led a couple of woodland folklore walks, and I did a lot of reading, like folklore reading, about that. And there was a really great section in one of the books I read about how in schools now we're not really taught about our own, like Britain's own folk beliefs. We're taught a lot about like ancient legend, like kind of Greek mythology and stuff. And again, it's like quite a niche thing, but it really spoke about how with like people used to really feel like they were part of the like ebbs and flows of nature. Like we'd look to nature for like guidance, like when the hawthorn flowered, that was like the start of summer, and things like that. Like we were very kind of intrinsically intertwined with it, and because of like the church and stuff, we kind of, that separation started a bit, and it like severed the connection that people have with the earth. And I think that is quite to do with climate change now, because I think there's a lot of education about what climate change is. Oh, we need to deal with it fast, and it can be quite kind of daunting. And like, even though it is very important and it does really need to be um taught in that way because it is so urgent, I also think a lot of it comes from connection, and that should kind of come from an early age. And by learning our own like folk beliefs, and it doesn't have to be those stories, I think it's just about reestablishing people's connection with um even just like trees. Like that's what our walk was about, is kind of thinking about your own personal memories with trees. It's like even like collecting conkers when you were a kid and stuff. And then if that tree that used to drop your favorite conkers falls down, that was like quite a sad thing. And I think by having that connection locally with your own green space kind of makes you want to protect it more, and then from that you want to protect the earth. And I think that should be a part of climate education, is re-establishing our connection with the earth. And that's quite a lot of what London Wildlife Trust is doing. And I think it's a really kind of strong approach that should be started from a younger age, because suddenly when you're in secondary school and it's like, by the way, the earth is dying, save it. It's quite a kind of bold thing to do, if you're not, if you don't really feel like it's affecting you personally.
Do you have any thoughts on how that interacts with a person's sense of place, and belonging to a particular place?
Yeah, massively. I think recently we met somebody who um, was had a real connection with like walnut trees specifically. And I think through things like that, where you um, can find kind of pieces of home in nature, I think can make you feel very grounded. And um I think that is a very like important thing. And it was really cool to speak to them and like see how they were kind of finding walnut trees specifically to connect them with like their home. And um it can feel very, I think in Britain especially, it can feel very not like home and kind of unwelcoming. But like nature is really for everybody. And I think maybe like folk beliefs and traditions can get a bit twisted into being like, oh, this is British culture, this is ours, this is for us to preserve. But really, like, British folk beliefs are from so long ago, and it was all about um, connection and um, really like community. And I think that's a bit lost. And I think um, actually like migration and stuff is part of that, and also it's very much part of folklore. That's how stories are told, and that's how connections are made. And it's by meeting people and talking to people that that stuff really thrives. And I think that's maybe something we're losing.
Okay. And in your view, how how does that prepare young people? How could that prepare young people to take climate action?
As I said, like it's a very niche part of it. I think that really is about starting that connection in order to want to fight and save. Like it's I don't know. I found the approach for my generation was very much like we're close to losing everything. Like climate change is so bad, everything is about to go wrong, and you need to find a way to save it. And it feels like a very big task. Like I know it's taken up a lot of my childhood. Like I used to go on, and I still do, like the climate marches. I used to leave school and go up to London for a climate march, and it felt like that was a really big thing to do. Um, but I did struggle with the fact that I don't feel like I've got the brain to solve climate change. Like I don't know how to do that. Like I'm not a politician at all. I don't have that power. Um, but what I've actually found quite recently is using kind of different means, like using kind of with our walk, for example, using creativity to engage people to go outside and learn a bit about trees and learn like folk beliefs that used to be attached with them is a really great way of just like slowly starting that connection back up in order to want to help on a more local level. Because if everybody's very connected and is contributing on a local level, it makes such a big difference. Like it really is, like every kind of little helps. And obviously we need that balance again. Like we need people doing the big things and the big changes, and it is the big companies, but that feels like a very big thing for just like somebody, like one person to solve. And I feel like it is through that balance and making sure we have that balance that we kind of can achieve the most.
I kind of liked that idea that Edie said about how when sometimes climate education is just kind of thrusted onto school kids, it's almost a bit like climate conscription. It's like you have no idea what's going on. You know, you don't know why it's important. Perhaps you don't have the connection to nature, but you need to care about it because it's your future, right? And I think that's why the folklore is such an important part of how the most we can do is connect with nature. And then I think perhaps education needs to be more centered around, not entirely around why it's happening and who's doing it, although that is important. It also needs to be a good chunk of what are things you can do as a 13-year-old, perhaps, that can alleviate the stress that comes with it. Because with young people, climate anxiety is a really big thing. And I think perhaps that's an aspect that education doesn't really touch upon.
Yeah, I mean, Edie and Anchal both made really good points that I don't know how much more to add, so I've written a bit so I remember it. But like on at least on Anchal's point about and Edie's, like it seems really pessimistic when they're like, the world's dying, you've got to save it. But like, how do you do it? And in that sense, to focus first on climate education, I think it would be nice, at least in my experience, climate change was only covered in like science topics, but it's not just like a science issue, it's a very human issue, and that encompasses all subjects. So I think it'd be nice if it was like focused on more so than just in science as an opportunity, maybe. For example, in history, like what has happened, what progress has happened since, and that also might alleviate the stress of like the pessimism for the sake that we can see what we've done since we've realized about this issue and what changes have been made. And that does give a bit of positivity in the sense that like things have changed, but this is just a multi-generational issue. It will take generations to alleviate it. And it will just take a lot of time and a lot of us to do so. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. So in that sense, maybe a more holistic view, for example, in history, going over what's happened, what changes have been made, or even in English, in like Anchal said, like for a 13-year-old to be like, oh, what can you do? It's like, oh, maybe mention like like persuasive writing when you do it in school. It's like, oh, mention to your MP, and that gives them is training them for skills that they can use onwards afterwards, and I think that's very useful. And onto for like just climate change in general, I think to make people care, you have to expose them to it, because if people are unaware, then they're not gonna, they won't know, and they also won't care about what might happen. I was recently at a workshop, and because nature and humans don't live separately. We refer to both topics separately, but we're very much part of the same world. At least I grew up in Malaysia and came here as a kid. And it's daunting when suddenly everything you look around is like very different. Like the trees are different, the plants are different. I know when I go back, when I see like just, it's like very casual to have like a papaya tree or a banana tree like in someone's backyard. But over here, also because over here everything's very expensive. So then you see it in your backyard, you're like, well, it makes you laugh a little, but also it's like, it just makes me really happy to know. Or like people have different, countries have different like national, oh sorry, I keep kicking my table. Countries have different national flowers, and I know when I see like a hibiscus flower, because that's Malaysia's national flower, I get really happy because I just associate that with like, oh, my mum's family, like my hometown, stuff like that. So in that sense, it's like Edie said, folklore. With folklore, it's nice to have a connection, because that connection is exposure, and that gives people like like a positive association and something to care about, and to know that like, yeah, that it could disappear is it's really sad, really daunting, but it makes you want to make sure that doesn't happen. And oh yeah, and sorry, onto the topic of the workshop I went to recently, they were mentioning, oh, what can schools possibly do to engage, like not just the school kids, but the community. So for example, the students' parents, to engage them in like urban nature and encouraging, because the kids only have so much say of what they do. If you encourage the parents, that'll like transfer onto the kids. And in that one of the participants mentioned that, oh, as we're in London, there's a lot of people from different parts of the world. It's nice if maybe you do like a plant sale and have plants that are native to like some people's regions, because that's like a connection, and that's a connection that people might not see in the UK, but it does make you happy. And then from that, they could be like, oh, plants, this is like, it's a sense of history, sense of culture, but also it's a way to transfer it from like, oh, this is plants here. And then I feel like it's easier to make that connection to plants in Britain or plants elsewhere in the world where we need to focus. So yeah, that sense of familiarity and that sense of exposure does help to care. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
I'm wondering whether you have any thoughts about what could have been included or what should be included in your education that would have given you more of the knowledge that you require. So you've got, the connection is one side of it, and actually, having a sense of, oh, this is why it's important, this is what's happening, this is what we care about. But the knowledge to actually do something, whether it's as a 13-year-old or as a 22-year-old, or as the career, as your careers, as as you get older. I'm curious whether there's anything whether you have any thoughts about what could be included knowledge-wise that maybe wasn't.
At least for me, I think maybe because it's a current issue and an ongoing issue, maybe it would have been nice to have it included in PSHE days. Because at least for my school, if it was mentioned in a PSHE day topic, you sort of had that reoccurring topic like why smoking's bad, or other life skills or stuff that will continue with you from outside of school. And every year they still go over the same topics. Maybe like in year 7, they have a whole 1-hour presentation on maybe why you shouldn't smoke. Whereas in year 11, maybe it's a 15-minute quick reminder that we're still aware of the different facts. So maybe something like that would be nice. And also that, at least in my school, that was done with your like homeroom, like your tutor, your homeroom teacher. So it's also nice for the sake that you get perspectives of teachers outside of their subject. So that could be quite useful, maybe, potentially.
Thank you. Okay, Aanchal, same question to you.
I think what would be really helpful, and I would be connecting what's happening now, and that's there's so much happening with the climate now. You know, the climate crisis is in kind of full swing with wildfire season, you know, taking over the term fall in North America, with the flooding in the Punjab region, and all these kind of things happening. And I think with young people, it's really important to use that as a talking point and as an education point. But I think, unfortunately, it often falls on the shoulders of teachers themselves and their interests rather than something that is integrated into the curriculum. And I think that's why perhaps you see inconsistency in people's level of education when it comes to climate and climate action. Apart from that, I think another thing is in my 20s, I've been getting a lot of kind of informal education on Instagram about, you know, climate change and actions we could take. And I think perhaps it would be nice to, like I said before, incorporate that into the education system as providing a tool for people that is relevant and doable in their age range to make them feel not so hopeless. And that could be small things from exploring your neighborhood to build that connection with nature, or volunteering on, you know, there's so many youth climate actions happening, especially in a place like London. And I think really advertising those opportunities to go beyond the classroom, it would be really good. Yeah, I think those are my points.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, can you, Anchal, what do you think specifically about the balance between uh, practical action that we can take and that sort of more theoretical side of things? What do you think about that balance? And maybe it's something that's about, you know, it's age appropriate or so on. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that balance?
Um, that's actually a really good point, and something I forgot to mention is I think what I'm saying is really proper is going for, you know, individual action. And I think a big part of the climate crisis is understanding the theory and how individual action is actually not a big part of causing it, but is definitely a part of it. So I think that balance is important, um, to learn about the whys and the whos, um, but then understanding that there are outlets for your individual action to have a space, although it might not be as impactful as, you know, a fossil fuel organization shutting down. It's still a step forward, and it's something, you know, something I've seen on social media is people who feel strongly about the climate crisis, but don't take any action, are just going to be in a perpetual state of sadness because they feel like there's nothing they can do. So I think that balance is really good, but I think it's also not forgetting that, you know, the responsibility isn't on the individual, it is on what the theories allude to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, Tirion, if I could come back to you, there was one thing you said earlier that I've been pondering over, and you mentioned using things like a task, like a persuasive writing task, using that as as an opportunity to embed climate change education into the curriculum. I am wondering, I want you to start us off on this, you know, this kind of theme of when there are so many different things. Now I'm kind of forgetting who mentioned, you know, you have a lesson on PSHE lessons. Which one of the two of you was it that mentioned that? Kind of, I wasn't looking properly. Yeah, exactly. So Tyrion, yeah, you mentioned about PSHE lessons, and you talked, you know, specifically there an example of the dangers of smoking as an example. There are. What are your thoughts on the different types of crises that different types of crises, different important issues that are to be covered at some point over a young person's career at school? What are your thoughts about prioritizing climate change education over other priorities as well? What are your thoughts? I think I have a sense of what you might say, but yeah, go ahead.
I feel like that's a very hard question because, yeah, climate change isn't the only issue we're going through right now. So I don't know how I would prioritize it as well because
Mm,
it feels wrong to not dismiss, but like rank them because
thank you.
everything has its own like why it's important
Mm,
because yeah.
yeah.
But onto that, I think what's like an important thing, at least if like for the different issues, is that I think it's important that they are reoccurring. If like in the education sense, if it's reoccurring, like it should be mentioned more than once, just to give people more chance to remember it and just to give them more exposure. And like, for example, when Anchal was like, oh, when she was 22 is when she like properly looked and stuff. I feel like as we grow older, we see things differently. So what we might not relate to in year 7, we might relate to more in year 9. And just giving us the chance to like see that progress, I think would be beneficial.
Edie, what do you think on that sort of violence thing?
I strongly agree with Tirion. Like, it's hard to prioritize things, and I do feel like it is tough that it kind of all. It feels like you have to cram in everything into your like time at school, and you have to learn about everything. You have to fight for everything, and you almost have to like pick your issues. It feels very difficult, and like it is a very difficult thing to approach. I think one thing that's can be kind of done for that is integrating it, like Tyrion said, integrating it into other subjects, but that doesn't mean that, I don't know, what I'm trying to say, I think, is it feels like with climate change specifically, it almost felt to me at school, the only real like big voices you're hearing about it is like people like David Attenborough, Greta Thunberg, and I think it needs to be shown that you don't have to be the next Greta Thunberg to like save the world, and you can incorporate it into what you love, and I think it makes it a lot more approachable to do. Say, like I was talking to a writer yesterday who said that they'd really like to be part of like conservation and climate change, but they don't know how. And I was saying, well, I think that's the thing, is there's a lot of space, and applying your kind of skill to the issue is a great way to kind of attack it on all sides. And if we started that at school, like have it be part of like creative, right, like exactly what Tyrion said, then it kind of gives people the drive. Like you don't have to leave behind everything, all your aspirations and everything you want to do personally, because it feels like there's a bigger issue. Like it does fit, as well as prioritizing all the issues that you have to cover in school, you also have to prioritize what you actually love doing and what you kind of see for your future. But I found that with the traineeship is I could apply my creativity to kind of fighting that issue, and I think that's like a really great way to approach it, is by having that balance and integrating it into all subjects, like exactly what Tyrion said.
Edie, there you started to answer that question on like, why is it important to involve young people and children into these discussions kind of as early on as possible. I was wondering if either of you have, Anchal, Tirion, if either of you have anything to add on that, on like why it's important to start this earlier on, bringing young people into the conversation about what their education is going to look like, and specifically about what their education on climate change is going to look like.
I might just say that like when doing the traineeship, we did educational sessions, and at least my experience doing it was like all these, we did it from like nursery to year 7 mainly, and like even like year 2, year 4, all these kids, they all have they all have their own opinions, and some of them feel them very strongly. So I guess in a sense that from starting from a young age, they can like decide for themselves over time, and giving them the chance to explore and make up their mind. Like, not saying that they can't change their mind during that period, but it would be interesting to see how they feel about it themselves, and giving them the chance to say how they feel. Well, yeah, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That kind of brings us on to how you all feel at this point in your careers, and kind of where are you where are you going next? What are the things that you are focusing on at this stage? So you've finished the traineeship just a month ago. What's next on the horizons for you? That's one part of the question. And also, what's front of mind for you when you think about climate change, when you think about the environment?
I can go on that
Go
if
ahead.
you'd
Sure.
like. Um, so after finishing the traineeship, I've started my new role with a charity in Southwest London. It's called thank you. It's called Habitats and Heritage, and it looks at spaces both historically and in the future. You know, how can we make a space that reflects the culture, the heritage, but is also serving for the community now, and you know, the crises that we're facing right now with climate change, biodiversity, pollution. And I think I really like making my role, and I want to pursue more roles like this because work is a long part of your life. And I think I want my efforts to go towards something where it really resonates with my values and my morals. But I also think that, you know, when it comes to going forward, thinking about climate change and what's happening right now, I think it's a really hard question because I almost feel as if I'm not doing enough. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people feel because that again, that point about how individual action feels so kind of like a drop in the water sometimes. Um, but I think going forward, I'm going to do as much as my life allows me to do. You know, just in the past year, I've started composting for my garden, and that's something I enjoy. And that's something that I don't feel obligated to do, but I think that brings me joy. But aspects of it have to be a bit daunting. You know, it can't all be breezy, easy. And so that does mean, you know, getting involved a bit more politically, perhaps learning, you know, my due responsibility to learn at the big age of 23 exactly how the government works and stuff like that. So I think
Okay.
that's what's gonna be going forward. That's what I'm gonna be doing.
And as you think about, how big a part of life work is, what advice would you, if you had to say one thing to a teacher, a school leader who, if this is what their life is, that's what their work is, what would be one thing that you would say, Anchal, to a teacher, a school leader who's thinking about, what more can they do? What decisions should they be
Oh
making for
gosh.
their students?
Uh, it, I'd like to say thank you to the teachers because now growing up, and you know, yesterday I saw one of my old teachers on the bus, and as an adult, I can see them as another person as opposed to, you know, them being a teacher. And I think they're already doing so much. They really are stretched. And I don't exactly know how it is for them, but I've heard, you know, that it's not a particularly well paid job, that hours can be long and tedious. And I've known quite a few people in my industry who were teachers but have switched over just because they need that work life balance. So I feel like, you know, if you are a teacher, you're already doing quite a lot, especially if you bring these really hard topics and kind of try to break it down for your students to make sure that they're well informed, because ultimately that's going to serve them in the future. So a big thank you. Keep on doing what you're doing. Don't burn yourself out. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, Edie, do you wanna go next? What's on the horizon for you? And what's front of mind for you as we think about climate change education and young people?
Yeah. So I haven't got his job as fast as Angel. But I've got a trial shift next week for this like kind of forest school nursery that I'm really interested in. Is what I want to get into really is um being able to do creative workshops and stuff with kids to or with adults to engage people in nature. Like it's kind of what I've been saying through the whole, and that has been quite a recent revelation of mine. Is it's like what I was saying with school, but combining what I enjoy doing with what I feel very passionate about, just like it feels like the perfect route. Like it feels like I'm kind of covering those issues. So fingers crossed for that job. But if not, like I'm gonna keep looking for anything where I get to like work creatively, which is what I love doing, and like it just feels like I've got more purpose for it now. Like I've always been doing creative things, but now I feel like I've got a kind of much
Yeah.
more vivid purpose for it. And obviously, like I knew about climate change and I knew about that stuff, but it just like motivates you. And it was like what Anchal's saying with like, there's a lot of burden on teachers to do that and be that kind of educator. And I feel like it could come across as a bit of a like climate change education can seem like a bit of a like gray cloud, like it's got a kind of negative thing around it because it is a negative thing. But um having that balance of like approaching things with enthusiasm and enjoyment and like enjoying what you're doing, I think can be very powerful, and that's kind of where I want to sit.
Thank you. Thank you. And I like that little tidbit of advice you've given to for teachers and school leaders there at the end. Forest school sounds like what you know as school to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. They it really they actually at my primary school they started doing like, because forest school is like an official thing, they started doing it after I left, but they already kind of had it when I was there. Like we were like sat in the field making dough over fires, and like I was a scout as a kid as well, so it was like very much part of my childhood. And I feel like moving to London, that has been like a massive thing, and I've lived in London for like coming up on, oh no, it is 5 years now. um and it's only recently that I've really realized how urban kids don't have those opportunities like on their doorstep. Have that same like amazing outside childhood that I got.
Thank you. And Tyrion, over to you. What's on the horizon for you?
I am also currently looking for a job, but I don't know, after doing the traineeship, it's something I've realized that I really like working with, like looking at nature and people's connection and engaging them with it. So I think I've been spoiled in a way that I've seen what, like, I've seen it and I've really enjoyed it. And now I don't know how I'll be able to take a job that isn't quite similar or doesn't have similar outcomes to that. So
Uh,
yes.
do you see a way that teachers could have that similar outcome? That's I don't know, maybe there's something of a leading question in there. So that yeah, do you see a way that teachers, school leaders could make schools a bit more of an environment? If you had one thing that you could say they could change or do more of that might make a school a bit more of that environment, what would you say?
I mean, it's really difficult to say because, like Anchal said and Edie said, like teachers are working so hard, and it's easy for maybe like for me to say, "Oh, add in PSHE day," but that's like more planning for them on top of all the work they do normally, on top of all the behavioral work they have to do on top of that. So it can be difficult. But at least in my experience, I realized that sometimes a bit of learning outside of the classroom, I think, can be really helpful. Again, it's easier said than done. But but to be honest, I think teachers are trying to do that more, like trying to make trips or trying to do different things and make learning more engaging. So if they keep going the way they're going, I'm sure we'll see changes. I'm sure if I were to go into secondary now, it would be very different to the experience I had in small ways. So over time, I'm sure, yeah, things will change.
Can I add as
Thank
well, quickly, that like really leading on from what Tyrion said, that outdoor learning is like so useful. I think not just because like you're doing something different from the classroom, but being outside does such wonders. Like I've felt that so much working outside. Like we worked outside every day for 4 months, And like the mental health benefits and the physical health benefits that I felt were like astronomical. Like you kind of think like, oh yeah, getting outside, it does you good, but it really does you good. And I think one of the education officers at the trust said to me, like, it's as much for the teachers as it is for the kids. Like the kids love it because they're outside and it can really regulate them, but also for the teachers, that you're sat inside all day, like even after the kids, you're still sat inside, you're marking, you're doing whatever. Getting outside does you so much good. And I think it's as beneficial for the kids as it is for the teachers, and it should be like a very integral part of education.
So the question that we've asked all of our guests, and it'll be, you know, I find it quite inspiring hearing everybody's different answers. So I'm sure you've seen this in our briefing, and you kind of like hope you're like quite primed to respond to this. But if you could imagine a world where climate change doesn't exist, what does it look and feel like to you?
I think it would be very like relieving. It would be nice to not have the climate anxiety and like the stress of the future, at least in that aspect, and not think about that. And for example, looking just in a biology, like biodiversity sense, without climate change, certain other things would also like not be changing as quickly. So it would be nice to not like that's one issue and it would affect other issues. But then again, mentioning what we mentioned before, it's also like, oh, well, now we've got to focus on all the other important issues that we also still need to address in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'd be very like relieved, like, yeah, just feeling a sense of relief.
Really, yeah, because I guess when we talk about climate change, we talk about a crisis. And so without that, I mean, yes, just a little bit more space to breathe. Thank you. Edie?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Like the amount of stress that would be lifted would be huge. And I feel like um, it is one of those issues where every other issue relies on, like there's nothing on a dead planet. So to not have that really means we could focus on, and I feel like kind of the focus on community and the focus on like nurturing people would become a lot more prevalent. Like I think everything gets kind of pushed down because we've got this big focus on where we live, and really like everything is balanced. Like I don't think anybody's really saying like we need to have a world where there's no humans, it's just nature and it's beautiful. Like I think really what everybody wants is to have that balance where nature is thriving and humans are thriving. And I feel like if we didn't have the problem of nature not thriving, then we could really focus on all the human issues that we also have to kind of deal with, because it feels like we have too many.
Yeah. The climate crisis is so tied in with bigger systems of extraction and capitalism and, colonialism, in a sense that seeing a world without climate change it would be like there are fruit trees on the road and people are picking up their native fruits, their apples and their pears with their kids, and there are bumblebees and dragonflies flying around, and this family goes to their house and they've got a massive patch of a wildflower meadow in the back, perhaps a pond. Later that evening they're going to go to their local allotment to work with their community, to catch up, to check on Paul, who's been sick for a while. And there's that big feel of like life, it's people living. That's what it is. And there'd be a portion on the news every day at 8 p.m, good things that have happened in the world today. And it would be a utopia almost, wouldn't it?
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that kind of vivid imagery of that you've provided today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you for joining us on Imagining Otherwise.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been great. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
it's been
really
so
nice
nice.
conversation.
Yeah.
I was quite nervous before, and now I'm like, it's just a good time.
Just a good chat. Just a good chat. That's all for this episode. A huge thank you to Tirion, Aanchal and Edie for sharing their insights and experiences. Across our conversation, a clear theme emerged: the tension between competing priorities in the education system and the desire to give climate change education the space it deserves. But we also heard hope, that through different subjects and thoughtful sequencing across the school day, learning about climate change can be meaningfully woven into every part of the curriculum. It was great to hear their thoughtful reflections on their experiences in education and their hopes for the future as they begin their working lives. As always, thanks to our producer, Graham Jameson, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with anyone who cares about climate change education. See you next time.